Let's talk about this. All right, think of someone in this school. Think of someone in your grade, your classes, you think is smart. You know they're smart. God, they're so smart. Their grades don't even have to try. Why do you say that? Is it grades? How do you know that they're only, what we call only average IQ? And they only get good grades because they work. They're not smart or anything. Notice the cultural bias there. Our culture values talent over hard work, and I think that's wrong. I think that's opposite the way it should be. So just be aware, if you know someone that's real smart, are your parents smart? How would you know? Because if, and statistically this is pretty reliable, pretty valid, you probably have very close to the same IQ as your parents. If your parents are dumb, that means you're dumb. How would you know? If your parents are smart, I mean, it's kind of like you're measuring a ruler with that exact same ruler. So that's a wild thing. Do you have any teachers you just know are freaking stupid? Be honest. You're not going to hurt my feelings. I don't have any. I don't have any feelings. I got rid of those after the incident. So the question we have is, how do we know if someone else is smart? I don't know if anyone here has ever administered an IQ test. A couple of you might have taken them, but I don't think you've administered them. So how do you know? So what the heck are we even talking about? Let's go on to intelligence. Where did we leave off yesterday? Anyone? Anyone? Okay, that's cool. So you need to know the difference between ratio IQ. Ratio IQ is you're comparing mental age with chronological age. And let's kind of jump into a word that we hear when we're talking about it. And we have to be careful about this word. Definitely a no-no word. And the word is called, of course, retarded. That's an insult now. But we can see the origin of this word in Benet's work. I want you to, now be careful, don't do it in this school because we got cameras everywhere. All right, but maybe, just maybe, if you're bored waiting in line, leaning up against a wall somewhere, I want you to open up the little door, look at a fire extinguisher, and you'll see the words fire retardant foam. Anyone ever seen that? Fire retardant foam. To retard as a verb means to slow the growth. To slow the growth. Benet's idea is based on mental growth. So if you have a 6-year-old, that's their chronological age, their mental age is 6, fine, average IQ. That child now gets to be 7. Still mental age of 6, 8, mental age of 6, 10, mental age of 6, 30, mental age of 6. You can see where the word mentally retarded, the origins are because the child's mind did not grow. We talked about Terman and his deviation IQ. Deviation IQ, instead of comparing yourself against what you should be, your own mental age versus chronological age, we're going to compare yourself against the norm, against the mean. How far away from the mean do you deviate? Mean IQ is 100. Most people are going to be mean. If I had 1,000 people, 680 of them are going to be really close to me. I draw 680 little slashes. Now, there is a pattern to this, an average pattern, but we don't use the word average because it confuses us with the word mean. So what are we going to use instead of the word average deviation? We're going to use the word standard deviation. There is a pattern to how far away scores go across the mean. 680 people are going to be really, really close to the mean. 14 are going to be on this side. 14% are going to be on this side. Once we get pretty far away from the mean, we don't find a lot of people. We're only going to find about 2% of the people are pretty far away. 3 deviations away, 2% this side, 2% this side. Of course, you know where I'm going. I'm going to make ourselves a bell curve. What does this mean? Deviation IQ simply means how far away does a participant or does a client fall away from the average, from the norm. Different than standard, different than ratio. Ratio compares the chronological age against mental age. So what are we going to do? If I were a good teacher, I'd give you worksheets with a nicely drawn bell curve, and you got to fill in all these numbers. I'm not a good teacher, and I don't like paper. So flip your paper, copy this thing down, including the percentages, the z-scores, and the corresponding IQs. Are you really spending that much time making sure you have a perfect curve? Yeah. How many of you all have a curve that looks really, really ugly? Looks like I drew it. All right. Do you want me to talk as you draw, or should I just wait? All right, let's go into this. The mean IQ is 100. Okay. Now, we talk about standard deviations. We're also going to call them z-scores. So check it out. If mean is 100 and the standard deviation is 15, That means 1 standard deviation above mean, you have an IQ of 115. 2 standard deviations above mean, 130. This is important to know. Circle 130 and draw a smiley face. Because by a lot of measures, by some agreed upon standards, 130 and above is genius. 130 and above is genius. Which means that you're smarter. If you have 130 and above, you're smarter than 2% of the population. Which means 98% doesn't hit the genius threshold. If we have 2,000 kids in this school, by my math, 2% is 40. 40 kids in the school have an IQ above 130. Wow, that seems smart. Now, if we have 4 grade levels, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, that means we approximately have 10 geniuses in each class. Are you the one? How would you? He was like, no, I know I'm not. All right. Get lost in an elevator, pick the wrong nose, you got problems. What's up? What's my IQ?
Yeah.
I don't know. You believe me? That hurts. Have I ever lied to you?
Yes.
Wow. So you're saying I'm covering up my IQ?
Yes.
Is it because my IQ is really, really low and I'm embarrassed? Probably. A little bit above average? Aw, that's so nice. So check it out. You just have to be, this isn't complex. You will need to be familiar with this for my test. Maybe we'll do a little Socratic today and do a little space race at the end so you can really hammer this in. And the AP exam will have this. Go ahead.
Is the mean different across like different countries, cultures?
No. If you have a large enough sample size, then this, and the test is good, this will hold true if you can accurately translate an English IQ test into a Spanish IQ test, into an Uzbeki, all right, IQ test. So the idea is if everything's equal, then yeah. There's no difference between racial, ethnic, gender, or anything else like that. That's been tested and tested and tested. We will talk about, I'm going on record as saying there is no such thing as an IQ difference between males and females, blacks, whites, Asians, Hispanics, and the awkward miscellaneous category on forms. But, someone's like, that's me. You know, what do you even put like that? But that doesn't mean there aren't differences in scores. So we might find a little difference, a little kind of shake up in the data, that if certain groups score higher, that doesn't mean they have higher intelligence. Does that mean the test is bogus? Does that mean there's a white IQ test, a Hispanic IQ test? We'll get into that a little bit. Okay, if you have a Z-score of -1, what's your IQ? Wait, don't say anything. And I'll tell you why. We might investigate later in this class whether speed of thinking is related to intelligence. Do you always get annoyed that there's one kid, oh, it comes the answer fast? You're like, all right, so I'm going to do a teacher thing. I'm going to ask you a question, and we're going to have wait time. All right, check this out. If the mean's 100, and you have an IQ of 45, what is your Z-score? Don't say anything. What is your Z-score? Don't say anything. Hana, do, set, net, taset. What is it now? What's the answer? What's the Z-score if you have an IQ of 145? Someone say, I'm pointing at it, so someone say 3. Thank you.
You said 45.
Okay, I don't make mistakes. That's why when I buy pencils, first thing I do, cut off all the erasers. Because if you have erasers, it's an invitation to be sloppy. Go hard.
Why would you just like that?
What's that? You know, I don't like you. I don't like you right now, so here we go. All right, so we're rolling. Let's talk about genius. For some of you, this will be the only time you ever think about it, right, in this class. So, genius. Now, everyone's curious about it, but in psychology, is that if you have only $1 million in a research budget, is that the thing you should study? I mean, I think it's more of a trivia question because we got to kind of look at what is genius and what does it really mean. It's a nice thing, I guess, to have a high IQ, but if you have a high bank account, if you have a high IQ, if you have a low IQ, that is one measure of who you are that might not really give you the whole picture of a human being. Trivia question, her name is Marilyn Vos Savant. She's recorded to have the highest IQ, reportedly around 220. Which if I do my math right is about 9 standard deviations above norm. So she has a Z-score of +9. Other things we want to talk about high IQ, there's a lot of myths out there, high IQ societies. The most famous is going to be Mensa. What did I say was genius level IQ? Above what? 130. So that's kind of Mensa, which means you're smarter than what % of the population? 2 or 98%. All right, that's not the only one. 999 society, smarter than 99.9% of the population. I think there's the mega society. So what do these societies offer? All right, nothing. I'm not just saying that because I'm bitter. They won't return my phone calls and their lawyers tell me to stop writing them letters. They won't let me in. What we are saying is, I guess people kind of really get off on saying they have a high IQ, talking to people with high IQ. But what I've known, and believe it or not, I've known a few smart people in the world. The smarter you are, kind of the less you really need to advertise it. And there really isn't a tangible benefit. Some people say networking. People with Mensa are in positions to hire, positions to award contracts, to positions to make sales, and maybe there's some professional career-like advantages. Depends on who you ask. Or am I just bitter because they won't let me in? Stupid 129 and a half. No, just kidding. All right, so here we go. The idea here is, what does geniuses mean? The stereotype of a nerd is not true. Big Bang Theory has really done a lot to perpetuate the idea that nerds are socially awkward. Nerds are miserable, grumpy people. And generally geniuses, there isn't a strong correlation between genius, common sense, low emotional intelligence, low emotional, ability. The definition of a genius depends on who's defining it. Mensa says one thing. University of Schmidlappville says another. But we're basically saying at least 2 standard deviations above norm. We talked about usually higher than 98%. 130 above is 2 standard deviations. We got that. Again, if you understand this, I'm not saying you need to copy down every word verbatim. I'm going to go out on a limb, and this is kind of a new trend. Now, there is debate in cognitive psychology. There is debate in the subdomain of intelligence testing within cognitive psychology as to what is genius. I'm going to come down on this side. Genius is based on work. Let's talk about Mozart. All right, Mozart was a genius by all accounts. But and people say he wrote a symphony when he was 4, when he was 5, 10 years old. You know what he was writing when he was 10-year-old? A symphony written by a 10-year-old. He did not write his best stuff till he was 28. Has anyone ever heard the idea? It's not been scientifically proven, but it's a standard people throw out there, called the 10,000 hour rule. To be an expert, you got to spend 10,000 hours practicing and doing the thing. People aren't, except for maybe Da Vinci, people aren't geniuses across a whole area. People are geniuses in one thing. I don't know if Zuckerberg is a genius. I don't know if he had one heck of an idea at the right time and he pursued it relentlessly. Is Zuckerberg smarter than the rest of us? He saw an opportunity, he created something? Or is he just one heck of a good businessman? Did he work harder? Let's look at Tiger Woods. Let's look at the Williams sisters. Let's look at any Olympic athlete. Maybe they do have genetic gifts that many of us don't. But they also really liked it. They had a passion for it. And they had parents that supported them and paid for them. There's not a lot of skiers, Olympic skiers, that live in Florida. I wonder how many families of Olympians moved, relocated towards a ski slope where they could practice. Go ahead.
Then you have people like the Kardashians that are also very successful. So are they smarter than us?
The Kardashians. Are they smarter? Are they smart? What I'm going back to our warm-up question. If you think someone's smart or dumb, how do you know? And this is a wild thing. Let's make it science. Let's not make it opinion. So to that, we are reliant upon IQ. We are reliant upon intelligence testing. And this is the best we got. Are some people geniuses that are non-competent? Sure. Most people who are geniuses do enjoy a higher standard of living, money, emotional health, marital satisfaction, blah, blah, blah. Is it a guarantee? No, because there's so many other factors. All right, Edison's quote, genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. There's a lot of lazy geniuses we've never heard of. We only hear about the people that did not give up. We need to talk about a savant. A savant is someone who has genius-like incredible abilities, almost superpower-like abilities, but in a very narrow area. Maybe with counting, maybe with art, maybe with music. And oftentimes it's associated with autism. Now, folks with autism do not always have savant-like abilities. Really, only about 10% of folks that have ASD, autism spectrum disorder, have savant-like ability. So it's pretty daggone rare. Go ahead.
Is it just a coincidence that her last name is
I do believe it's a coincidence that her last name is Marilyn Vos Savant. All right, so let's go on, continue talking about genius. Let's jump into the idea neurologically of a hypothesis when it comes to autism. The idea is maybe autism is hyperdense wiring in certain brain areas. So you get these specialized abilities, but maybe, just maybe, autism is also a lack of connectivity between areas. So maybe the emotional, while it might have hyperwiring and could lead to tantrums and frustration, might not be connected perhaps to the prefrontal cortex as densely as other areas. Maybe the social is not as connected. I'm not saying autistic folks don't have emotions. Clearly they do. I'm not saying autistic folks aren't social. Clearly they are. But I think that perhaps there might not be connections between brain modules and brain circuits. Let's talk about a child prodigy. Again, talking about Mozart. Talking about someone who's an amazing, gifted athlete, musician, spelling bee person at a young child. Do they have genetic talent? Absolutely. Did parents there to support them? You betcha. But if you look at the longitudinal prediction, it doesn't translate usually into adulthood. All right, let's talk about mental retardation. The new word we're going to use is developmentally disabled. There's a category of that. Down syndrome, of course, is the most well-known. But there's nearly an infinite amount of way to have someone's cognitive abilities negatively impacted. Life circumstances, genetics, chromosome. So when we roll on, what I want to say is that when we talk about developmental disabilities or retardation, IQ of less than 70, how many standard deviations below mean is that? Anyone? I'll give wait time. Hannah, Tool, set 2. You didn't even wait time. Shame on you. Whoever said that, shame on you. So, and do not do well in society, however well is defined. So let's talk about Forrest Gump. Clearly he had a low IQ, but he went to the White House 5 times. He was a star athlete, international ambassador. What did Forrest Gump not do? I know it's mythical, but the idea is, how do we define well in life? Maybe someone's found their niche. Maybe someone works at the grocery store, and you know what? They might not do some intellectual heavy lifting, but they're pretty good at stacking the boxes, collecting the carts. Maybe they get a steady paycheck. Maybe they found their niche in life. So it's not, again, we can't be careful to reduce a human being down to a number. Do you guys as students feel like you're reduced down to a number, your GPA, your SAT, and that's all colleges look at? So you can see the reductionist problem. We want to make psychology a science, but we lose it. If we narrow the definition of intelligence down to a number, we lose the humanity of it. You could have a whole bunch of ethical, sociological, philosophical, and political debates. Familial retardation, there are some genetic links. And there's socioeconomic status. Parents who don't have a lot of money, don't have a lot of time, don't have a lot of skills themselves, how are they going to raise a child who's bright? So does the cycle of poverty, does the cycle of low intelligence perpetuate? Oftentimes it does. Environmental issues, sensory deprivation. You and I both know from our sensation unit, from the study of Jeannie, who was neglected, locked in a room for about 10 years, the brain needs input. Trauma, head injury. All right, you guys don't, I need a volunteer. All right, I'm going to give you a concussion. Don't worry, it won't hurt for a second, and you won't remember a thing. Okay, stand up. You won't even feel it for more than, all right, so Judge says I can't hit people anymore. Disease, meningitis. Meningitis is crucially contagious, and oftentimes you'll hear in big universities, one kid in a dorm has meningitis. It means the brain, the lining of the brain is swelling, and the skull is enclosed. When the brain swells, where can the brain swell to? So what does it do? The brain swells on itself, and it crushes itself. All right. Poisoning, lead paint, drugs, alcohol. The question we want to ask is, how are the skills, what on a day-to-day basis is someone with a mental disability, how does that differ from us if we're all near average? Check it out. Just as proficient as recognizing simple stimuli. That's a car, that's a horse, that's red. They got that. Rate of forgetting from working memory, it's still the same. So now, what if I said cannot retrieve information from long-term memory as quickly? Maybe I should do wait time to even the playing field. Every time I ask a question, What do you got? Should I give you all wait time? Do not answer. Now you can answer. You can see that that in a classroom setting might not be applicable for every question. Not very good at using strategies to process and problem solve. What we're talking about is maybe not with algorithms, maybe not with bottom up. Many of us are lucky enough that we can think a problem through from different angles. And maybe they don't know, they don't have as much knowledge. And maybe they don't have as much knowledge because they can't get knowledge as easily. And oftentimes folks with severe or moderate mental disabilities don't have this thing called metacognition. Metacognition might be like Wilhelm Wundt's introspection, the ability to look inside yourself. Metacognition means to think about thinking. This is the new trend in a lot of education in younger years. Third graders are taught math, and they get the answer. 3 times 5 is 15. And the teacher says, okay, tell me how you got it. It's not good enough just to know it. You got to know how you thought about it. Most of us can do that to some extent. Also, related to this, people with some pretty severe mental illnesses, not disability, mental illnesses, have trouble analyzing themselves. That's a wild thing. They might not have insight into their illness. We'll get into that in a couple units. Okay, so what if we did this? There is a lot of evidence that IQ can be increased. Please know that whether it's genetic, please know that whether it's a traumatic brain injury, whether it's poison, whether it's bad luck, your brain gets injured, doesn't form. Can that person increase? Can that person achieve? And the answer is yes, yes, yes. Let me rephrase it. Is there a situation when the brain cannot grow? Kind of rare because of this thing called neuroplasticity. Do we have in this school folks who are really far below mean? No. This school is not the place for them. And conversely, is this school the place for someone with an IQ of 145? If you had an IQ of 160, is your average public high school the best place for you? I don't know. So you can increase intelligence, especially and even with those who are relatively low. Neuroplasticity. We talk about London cab drivers. You don't believe me? Go to Diagon Alley. That thing's crazy, man. Alleys and streets all crooked. London cab drivers is a pretty old study. Their brains are noticeably different on an MRI scan. Why? Because after decades of memorizing, decades of trying to figure out where they are, where they need to be, and 80,000 possible routes, their brains have grown. Their brains have adapted to the stress. They're noticeably different. What we're saying is neuroplasticity. If you stress your brain, it will grow in the right way or the wrong way. And this includes people with lower IQs. Genetic interaction with the environment, we know this, called teratogens, right? And then what about Head Start? What about the earlier you reach a child, can you affect their brain trajectory? And the answer is yeah. Hit these 2 vocabulary words, absolute intelligence, relative intelligence. All right, Patricia, I got a question for you. I'm looking at your bottle of water. The cap, if I may, is red. I'm looking at your lipstick. Your lipstick is the same shade. You know you need to open it right. I'll sit here and regret every choice I've ever made that led me to this point. You guys think I'm Mr. Swope. I'm not. I killed him. Took his identity.